The first thing I noticed was the blood on my own cuff. Not a lot, just a thin, rust-colored smear on the inside of my sleeve where the fabric should have been clean. The kind of mark that makes you check yourself in the elevator mirror and instantly regret it, because now you can't unsee what you've been pretending doesn't exist. Outside the glass walls of Verena Holdings, summer hammered the city like a fist. Inside, the air conditioning fought back with a cold corporate cruelty that made everyone carry sweaters they didn't wear. Everyone except me. I wore long sleeves and a high collar like a vow. My name is Mara Quinn, and for 7 months I'd been the executive assistant to Lucian Verena, the man whose name sat on buildings and lawsuits and charity dinners like a crown. I knew the rhythm of his days better than I knew my own pulse. His coffee, black, scalding, no sweetener. His folders, sorted by urgency, not by alphabet. His calls, screened with a soft voice and an unbreakable spine. His meetings, timed to the minute. The way he walked into rooms, like gravity had signed a contract. The bruise under my collarbone throbbed with its own private heartbeat as I organized the morning mail. It wasn't the first bruise I'd hidden. It was just the first one that felt like it might win. I kept my head down, kept my hands moving, kept the mask intact. That was the skill I'd mastered long before this job, making a disaster look like a routine morning. Mara, his voice didn't come from across the hall. It came from my doorway like a blade. Lucian stood there in a charcoal suit that looked tailored to his bones. No tie, white shirt open at the throat, dark hair combed back with quiet precision, a watch that probably cost more than my first car. His eyes met mine and stayed there a moment too long, like he was reading the fine print of me. "Inside," he said. "Now." I swallowed. "Your 9 o'clock will wait." I gathered the contract packet anyway, because I didn't know how to do anything else. I crossed the threshold into his office, the room that smelled like leather chairs and polished wood, and something sharper underneath. Control. Always control. He didn't sit. Close the door. My hand hesitated on the handle. We'd been alone plenty. Late nights, early mornings. Quiet hours when the building felt like it belonged to him and me by association, but the tone in his voice made my stomach tighten. Click. The latch engaged. I turned with the contracts held like a shield. "The Marconi lease renewals need your signature. Also, the city council liaison called about next week's zoning hearing and, why are you dressed like it's November?" I blinked. "Because the AC..." "You're sweating," he cut in, calm as a judge. "Your collar is damp." Heat climbed my throat in a rush of humiliation. I forced a laugh that didn't land. "I run cold." Lucian moved, 3 steps. No wasted motion. Suddenly he was close enough that the expensive cologne hit me. Clean, understated, dangerous in how effortless it was. "Try again." My fingers tightened on the folders until my knuckles went pale. "Mr. Verena..." "Mara," he corrected softly. "You don't call me that in here." He wasn't wrong. The first week I'd worked for him, he'd said it the way he said everything, like it was already decided. No sir, no boss, no mister. Just his name, like it was a bridge. Now it felt like a trap. Lucian's hand lifted, not touching me, hovering near my shoulder like he was resisting an instinct. "What happened to your arm?" My chest seized. "Nothing." He stared a beat longer, then glanced at my sleeve. "You have makeup on your wrist." I froze. He didn't ask it like a rumor. He said it like a fact. I tried to back up, but the edge of his desk met the back of my knees, stopping me with a blunt reminder. There was nowhere to retreat. "Show me," he said. "That's inappropriate," I managed, voice thin with the effort of keeping it steady. "You're my employer." For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his expression. Annoyance at being challenged, maybe, or something sharper. Then it vanished. "You're right," he said quietly. "It is." He stepped back, gave me space. The air returned to my lungs like permission. "So I'm asking you," he continued, voice still controlled, "as someone who is concerned, not as your boss, please." The word hit me harder than any shout. Men like him didn't say please. Not unless they wanted something. Not unless it mattered. My hands moved before my pride could stop them. I slid the cuff back and the sleeve up just enough. Purple and sick yellow bloomed along my forearm in a pattern that didn't look accidental, finger-shaped. Too familiar. My stomach rolled with shame. Lucian's jaw tightened. His hands curled at his sides. Controlled violence trapped behind bone. "Who did this?" he asked. His voice didn't rise. It went flat. That was worse. I yanked my sleeve down fast like fabric could erase truth. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He turned toward the window, giving me his back like a strange kindness. The city skyline reflected in the glass beside him, but he didn't look at it. He looked inward, where whatever rule book he lived by was written, I don't know what I'm supposed to think, he said. When you show up in summer dressed like winter, when you hide behind concealer, when you flinch when someone reaches for a stapler. My throat burned. It's my mother, I whispered before I could stop myself. The words spilled out like a dam giving up. She picks the wrong men. Always has. Her boyfriend, Rico. He drinks. He gets loud. He gets mean. I swallowed hard. Last night it escalated. I stepped in. I took the hit that was meant for her. I got her out. She's with my aunt now. She's safe. Silence filled the room like pressure. Lucian turned slowly. The look in his eyes wasn't pity. It was cold intent. A storm behind glass. Where is he now? He asked. I don't know, I said quickly. Probably passed out at the apartment, but it doesn't matter. My mother won't press charges. She never does. And I don't want— I know what you don't want, he interrupted, and his voice sharpened into something I felt in my bones. You don't want me to do what men like me can do. I lifted my chin. My heart hammered, but I forced my voice not to break. Yes. Lucian studied me like he was recalculating a plan. I'm not asking for a hero, I said. I'm not asking for your kind of solution. I've spent my whole life trying not to owe anyone, especially someone like you. He took a slow breath, his shoulders eased by a millimeter. Fair, he said. So we'll do this differently. My mouth went dry. What does that mean? It means you can refuse violence, he said, walking back to his desk, picking up his phone. And I'll respect that. He typed once, twice, like he was firing a warning shot into the void. But you cannot stop me from making sure you're safe. I don't need— You do, he said, not unkindly. And it doesn't make you weak. He looked up at me. I'm assigning protection. Discreet. You won't see him unless you need to. My spine stiffened. No. I said no to— I heard you, he said, voice steady. This isn't about revenge. This is about prevention. He set the phone down. His name is Declan. He's good. He will keep distance. He will not intervene unless there's danger. If you notice him, it means something went wrong. Understood? I stared, torn between anger and relief so sharp it felt like nausea. I don't want to be watched, I whispered. Lucian's gaze didn't waver. You've been watched your whole life, Mara, by fear, by uncertainty, by the next thing that might happen when you're not ready. He paused, voice lowering. Let me replace that watcher with someone who works for you. The room went quiet. I hated how much the words loosened something in me. Exhaustion won. Fine, I said, and the surrender tasted like salt. For now. Lucian nodded once, like that was the agreement he needed. Then he became the executive again, the man who ran the building. Your meeting, I reminded, because the routine was the only life raft I had. 9 o'clock. I'll handle it, he said. I turned to go, hand on the door. Mara. I looked back. Something in his expression softened in a way I wasn't ready to name. Not warmth, not exactly. More like a promise with teeth. I am not him, he said. Whatever you think I might become, I won't. My throat tightened. I couldn't trust my voice, so I just nodded and left. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Declan, I'm in a gray sedan across the street. Don't look for me, just know I'm here. I stared out the window anyway. And there it was. Ordinary, anonymous, parked like any other car in the city. For the first time in months, my chest loosened. Not into safety, not yet, but into the possibility of it. I turned back to the calendar, rescheduling Lucian's morning like nothing had happened, but everything had. And deep down, I knew I'd just stepped into a story where my bruises weren't the ending. They were the inciting incident. 2 weeks passed, and the building didn't collapse. That was the strange part. After that morning, Lucian never brought up my mother, never asked about Rico, never cornered me with questions. The subject vanished from his mouth the way certain men erase mistakes. Silently, cleanly, like it was never there. But his concern didn't disappear. It learned how to move quietly. Declan became a rumor in my peripheral vision. A gray sedan down the block. A figure by the parking garage pillar when I worked late. A shadow that shifted when I shifted. The first time I realized he'd walked behind me through the lobby, far enough that no one could accuse him of stalking, close enough that anyone with bad intentions would hesitate. My stomach flipped. I wanted to hate it. Instead, I slept a little better. My mother called every day now, her voice lighter, less frayed. She'd moved in with my aunt permanently and, unbelievably, started seeing a counselor at a community clinic. It's free, she'd said, like it was a miracle that kindness existed without strings. Can you imagine? They even have groups. Women who, understand. I could imagine. And I could also recognize the clinic's name from a list of grant recipients I'd typed into Lucian's files the week before. I didn't tell her. Some gifts were easier to accept when you pretended the universe delivered them. Work stayed intense. Lucian stayed Lucian. Meetings stacked like dominoes. Contracts thick with money and consequence. People came into his office and left looking like they'd just been skinned alive by a polite lawyer. But around me, his edges softened, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice. In the way he never raised his voice within my hearing. In the way he paused before speaking, like he was filtering out the version of himself that would frighten me. "You're early," he said one morning, stepping out of his office precisely at 8:30, like he always did. "I'm always early," I replied, handing him his coffee. His eyes flicked to my collar. Not an accusation, an assessment, like he was checking a wound that shouldn't exist. "Eat," he said, nodding to a small paper bag on my desk. I frowned. "What is that?" "Breakfast," he said simply. "You can't live on stress and caffeine." I stared at the bag. A warm egg sandwich, fruit, a yogurt with a brand name I'd never buy for myself. "I didn't ask for—" "I know," he said, already turning back toward his office. "You're welcome." It should have made me angry. Instead, it made me feel seen in a way that unsettled me more than anger ever could. A month into Declan's silent orbit, I made the mistake that cracked the wall between Lucian and me. I stayed late. I'd been finishing a presentation for a city hearing, one of those meetings where officials smiled while they held knives behind their backs. I'd gotten so focused on fonts and figures that I didn't notice the building empty out. By the time I saved the final file, the floor was dark except for my desk lamp and the pale light from Lucian's office. I gathered the printouts and walked to his doorway. He was standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm. The city glowed below him, but he looked as if he wasn't seeing it. "I have the deck ready," I said, keeping my voice professional, because professionalism was safer than admitting I was suddenly aware of how broad his shoulders looked without the suit jacket. "What time is it?" he asked without turning. "Almost 9. He turned then, and his expression tightened. "You should have gone home hours ago." "It's fine. I can take the train." His gaze flicked to my phone. "Declan's still downstairs?" "He leaves at 7 unless you extend him," I said. Lucian's jaw flexed once. "It's not fine," he repeated. He pulled his phone out and typed a message fast, like the world moved on his thumb. "Declan will be here in 10, he said. "Wait." I tried to push back, because old instincts screamed that accepting help made you dependent. That dependence made you vulnerable. "I'm capable," I said, too sharp. "I know," he replied, voice lowering. "Humor me anyway." There it was again. Soft control, wrapped in concern, the kind that didn't bruise but still carried weight. I should have argued. Instead, I exhaled. "Okay." Lucian walked toward the small kitchenette built into his office. One of those executive luxuries no one mentions out loud. "Coffee?" he asked, already reaching for the machine. I blinked. "It's 9 at night. I have work," he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You look like you do too." He poured 2 cups like it was the most normal thing in the world for a billionaire predator of boardrooms to share caffeine with the assistant who filed his receipts. "Black," I said automatically. He arched a brow. "You're paying attention. It's literally my job." He handed me the cup, and the warmth seeped into my palms like permission to be human. We stood in silence for a moment, the office suddenly intimate in a way daylight never allowed. The city hummed beyond the glass. The air conditioning whispered. My heartbeat was too loud. "You think I'm dangerous?" Lucian said quietly. My stomach dropped. "That's not—" "It is," he said, turning slightly. "I saw it in your eyes that morning. You were afraid of what I'd do." I couldn't lie. "Not after everything." "Yes," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I was." Lucian's expression didn't harden. It almost softened, like something in him was relieved that I wasn't pretending. "You were right to be afraid," he said, and the honesty of it made my throat close. "I can be violent. I can be cruel. I can end a man without touching him." My skin went cold. "But," he continued, and the word carried weight, "I can also choose not to." He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw the tension behind his control. Not the tension of anger, the tension of restraint, like he lived in a constant negotiation with the worst parts of himself. "With you," he said, voice even, "I want to choose better." My pulse stumbled. I didn't know what to do with that, with a man like him saying it like a vow. My phone buzzed. Declan, downstairs. Relief and disappointment hit me at the same time, and the mix made me feel unsteady. I set my coffee down. "He's here." Lucian nodded, face returning to its usual mask. At the door, he stopped me with a quiet, almost too soft, "Mara?" I looked back. "Be careful," he said. "I always am." "I know," he replied. His gaze held mine a beat too long. Be careful anyway. The next morning, I came in and froze. Flowers sat on my desk. Not roses, not anything dramatic, just white lilies in a clear vase, simple and elegant like a question nobody wanted to ask out loud. No card, no name. Gabby from finance passed by and lifted her eyebrows like she'd just discovered gossip as a religion. Secret admirer? She mouthed. Client. I lied, and my cheeks burned with how pathetic it sounded. Lucian walked out at 8:30 on the dot. His eyes flicked to the flowers, then to my face. His expression stayed blank. Good morning, he said. Good morning, I echoed, professional as a robot, heart like a live wire. He took the message slips from my hand, turned to go, then paused, voice low enough that only I could hear. They suit you. And he was gone, disappearing behind his office door like he hadn't just knocked a crack into my entire world. The lilies lasted a week before I threw them away like a coward. The next morning, orchids appeared, then peonies, then something rare I had to Google. I told myself it was harmless, until I got sick. Just a flu, fever, aches, the kind of misery that makes your apartment feel like a punishment. I texted in, can't come, fever. Lucian's reply came within a minute. Stay home, rest, paid sick days. I thought that was the end of it. At noon, someone knocked on my door. I dragged myself to the entry, ready to snap at a delivery driver. Declan stood there with a paper bag that smelled like soup and medicine. Mr. Verena asked me to check on you, he said, voice rough but not unkind. May I come in? My apartment was a disaster. Tissue piles, dirty dishes, me in pajamas that looked like defeat. Pride battled practicality and lost. Fine, I croaked. Declan didn't comment. He unpacked the bag like he was performing a small ritual. Soup, crackers, electrolyte drinks, prescription meds with my name printed neatly, tea that looked expensive. He called your doctor? I rasped, staring at the label. Declan's mouth twitched. He's persuasive. After he left, I sat on my couch and stared at the bag like it was a confession. I'd expected a man like Lucian to solve problems with threats. Instead, he'd sent soup. When I returned to work 3 days later, still pale and wobbly, Lucian appeared in my doorway faster than usual. You're still sick, he said, not asking. I'm fine, I lied, setting his coffee down. His eyes narrowed. Then he did something that made my breath stop. He lifted the back of his hand and touched my forehead. Brief, clinical, but intimate in a way that set my nerves on fire. You're warm, he said. I'm always warm when I'm nervous, I shot back, because sarcasm was my armor. His gaze sharpened. Are you nervous now? You're touching me, I said, and my voice shook despite my best effort. He pulled back instantly, stepping away like he'd been burned. I apologize, he said, and the sincerity was worse than arrogance would have been. That was inappropriate. It was. And yet part of me wanted him to do it again, which made me hate myself a little. Thank you, I said softly, for the medicine. Lucian's throat worked like he was swallowing something heavier than words. You're welcome. He glanced at my screen. You're going home. I have... Not negotiable, he said, tone firm but not cruel. Declan will drive you. I should have fought it. Instead, I obeyed, because my body was tired and my brain was tired, and for once, being taken care of didn't feel like a trap. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Sweetheart, a woman from a community foundation came by today, offered me a part-time admin job, good pay, flexible hours. Do you know anything about that? I stared at the text until my eyes stung. Then I typed back, That's amazing, Mom. Please take it. I didn't add, The foundation is funded by Lucian Verena. Some things you let stay in the shadows so the light can do its work. Rico reappeared on a Tuesday. Not in my apartment, not in my mother's doorway, not even in my sight. He reappeared the way men like him always do, as a message that makes your stomach fall out. Declan called me at my desk, voice low and tight. He's outside your mother's building. My fingers went numb on the keyboard. Is she okay? She's inside. Door's locked. He's sitting in his car across the street. A pause. Mr. Verena should know. No. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Silence. Declan exhaled like he was choosing his next line carefully. Mara, you know the system. Police don't act until something happens. I know, I whispered, because I did. I knew the useless reports and the shrugging officers and the paper-thin restraining orders. I knew the way the world pretends it can't see bruises until they become funerals. But I also knew what Lucian could do if he decided to solve a problem. Just watch, I told Declan. Keep her inside. Don't let him approach. I hung up and tried to breathe like a normal person. I failed. My hands trembled as I typed. Typos everywhere. my heart refusing to settle. Lucian stepped out of his office and took one look at me. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," I lied. "Badly." He came closer, not in a threatening way, in a way that felt like gravity tightening. "You're lying," he said, "and you're not good at it." I swallowed hard. "It's personal." Lucian's eyes flicked to my phone. "It's him." My head snapped up. "How?" "Declan reports to me," he said, simple as that. Then quieter. "Where is Rico?" "I told Declan not to call you." Lucian's expression didn't change, but the air around him did, like a storm front sliding in. "Mara," he said, voice careful, "I'm going to make sure your mother is safe." "No," I repeated, standing so fast my chair scraped. "I told you. I said no. I won't. I can't." He held my gaze and spoke like he was carving his words into stone. "I'm not asking permission to care. Care isn't what scares me," I said, and the truth tasted bitter. "It's what your care might turn into." Lucian's jaw flexed. He reached for his jacket. "Stop," I said, grabbing his sleeve before my brain could talk me out of it. Touching him was a mistake. My fingers felt the heat of him through fabric and my pulse jumped. He looked down at my hand, then back at my face. "What do you think I'm going to do?" he asked. "I think you're going to end him," I said, voice shaking. "And I think you'll call it protection. And I think I'll owe you. And I think I'll never feel free again." For a moment, Lucian just stared, the mask slipping enough for me to see the struggle beneath it. Then he nodded once, like he was accepting the charge. "I am capable of that," he admitted, and my stomach twisted. He leaned in slightly, voice low. "But I gave you my word." "You did," I whispered. "And you're going to make me keep it," he said, almost like a grim joke. I swallowed, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Yes." A long beat. Then Lucian exhaled, slow and controlled, like he was forcing a wildfire into a glass box. "Okay," he said. "No violence, no threats, just consequences." He moved to his desk and typed rapidly, messages firing out like chess moves. "What does that mean?" I asked, terrified of how smooth he looked even when he was restraining himself. "It means he'll leave," Lucian said. "And if he comes back, the world will become very inconvenient for him." He looked up. "Go home. Take your mother to my place if you need. I'll handle this. Promise me," I said, voice breaking. Lucian's gaze softened by a fraction. "I promise." I left work shaking. I picked up my mother and brought her to Lucian's penthouse, which still felt like stepping into a world that wasn't made for people like us. Marble floors, quiet lighting, art that looked like it belonged in a museum. My mother sat on the edge of the couch like she was afraid the fabric would charge her rent. "He's not going to hurt anyone, right?" she whispered, and the old fear in her voice made my chest ache. "I made him promise," I said, not entirely sure promises mattered when a man like Lucian decided they didn't. We waited. Tea went cold. Minutes stretched into hours. When the elevator finally chimed, my entire body tensed. Lucian walked in looking exactly the same as when he'd left. Suit perfect, expression calm, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction that made my skin prickle. My mother stood, hands twisting. "Mr. Verena, please," Lucian said gently. "Call me Lucian." He turned to my mother and spoke with a respect that felt almost surgical. "Rico won't be bothering you again." My mother's eyes widened. "What did you do?" Lucian smiled faintly. "I spoke to him." "That's it?" I asked, not sure I believed it. Lucian looked at me for a long moment. "I explained options," he said. "Legal ones, financial ones, social ones." He stepped closer, voice dropping, and I reminded him that harassing your family is a poor life choice. "You didn't touch him?" I asked. Lucian's gaze didn't waver. "No." Relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. My mother let out a sob she'd been holding in for years. Lucian didn't look proud. He looked tired, like restraint costs him something. After my mother went to the guest room, I followed Lucian into the kitchen. "You kept your word," I said softly. "I did," he replied, pouring water into a glass like he needed the steady motion. I stepped closer. "Thank you." Lucian's eyes lifted to mine, and something honest lived there. Something dangerous not because it threatened me, but because it made me want to trust it. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you were right to fear me. There are parts of me that solve problems in ugly ways." My throat tightened. "But you're also seeing the part of me that chooses not to," he continued. "And I need you to understand that I'm choosing it because I want to, not because you forced me. You're not my leash, Mara. You're my reason." My breath caught. I didn't have an answer for that. I only had the way my heart was suddenly too loud in my ribs. The next months changed me in small ways that added up to a new life. I stopped flinching when someone raised a hand to point at a chart. I stopped wearing my collar quite so high. I started laughing at Lucian's dry, impossible humor. I started speaking to him like he was a person and not a storm in a suit. One night, I spilled coffee on a set of contracts worth more than my entire childhood. I froze, bracing for impact. Lucian simply covered my frantic hands with his and said, "Breathe." It was such a small thing. It broke me anyway. "I thought you'd be angry," I admitted, voice cracking. "I'm not," he said, like anger wasn't even an option. "Has anyone here made you afraid to make mistakes?" I shook my head. "It's not them. It was everything before." Lucian's grip stayed steady. "Then learn this," he said, voice low. "You can make mistakes and still be safe." That night, I cried at home, not from fear, but from the unbearable relief of being treated like I wasn't one wrong move away from punishment. 2 weeks later, I got a migraine at work. Lucian sent me home. Declan drove me. The curtains in my apartment felt like blades of light. Then came a knock. I opened the door and found Lucian standing there with a pharmacy bag, looking absurdly out of place in my hallway like a king visiting a rented room. "You came yourself," I rasped. "I wanted to," he said simply. He held up the bag. "Prescription medication, the good kind. You called my doctor?" I stared. Lucian had the decency to look slightly sheepish. "I told her I was your boyfriend." "We are not—" "I know," he said, stepping inside when I moved aside. "But concerned employer doesn't get you the same medical cooperation." He guided me gently to the couch like I was something delicate, then sat on the floor beside it, back against the cushions, close enough that I could feel his presence without being crowded by it. "I'll stay until you sleep," he said. "You can't," I whispered. "I can," he said, voice quiet. "And I will." I should have told him to leave. I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, being protected didn't feel like being owned. I drifted off to the sound of his steady breathing. When I woke hours later, he was still there, jacket off, tie loosened, eyes lifting to mine like he'd been waiting. "You stayed," I whispered. "I said I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean." Lucian's gaze didn't flinch. "I'm not people." The words landed heavy. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. The room felt too small for how much I wanted to say. "Lucian," I started. He waited, perfectly still, like he understood the moment mattered. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Of this. Of you. Of how safe you make me feel. Safe means I have something to lose." Lucian reached up, thumb brushing my cheekbone with a gentleness that made my throat burn. "You already had something to lose," he said. "You just didn't have anyone helping you protect it." I swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" His eyes held mine with devastating clarity. "Dinner," he said softly. "A real one. Not coffee at midnight in my office. Dinner where we pretend the world isn't watching." I let out a shaky laugh that sounded like it might turn into a sob. "And after dinner?" Lucian's expression tightened, like he was choosing honesty again. "After dinner," he said, "I want to keep proving I'm not the kind of man you fear. A beat. And if one day you decide you can trust me," he added, voice almost rough, "then I want you to choose me. Not because I saved you, not because I can give you things, but because you want me." My chest ached. I stared at him, the man who could ruin lives with a phone call, who had kept his violence behind a locked door because I asked him to, who sat on my floor like it was the most natural place in the world. I took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Okay," I whispered. "Dinner." Lucian's eyes shut for a second like relief was something he didn't get often. Then he stood, offered me his hand, and helped me up with the kind of care that felt like a vow. And in that tiny apartment, with the city roaring outside and my past still clawing at the edges of my mind, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a man offering protection. This was a man offering a future, and I didn't know if I was brave enough to take it. But for the first time, I wanted to try.